Well, China has learned well the US lessons of how to wield soft power, as America has won hearts and minds by exporting its culture, values and bankrolling some nations, so China is following suit. The emerging superpower has an especially big stake in Africa. Exactly how much it hands out in aid is a state secret, but it is believed to run into the tens of billions of dollars. It's not all, though, about altruism. For a resource-hungry nation, China is buying a lot of favours. Earlier, I spoke with Philippa Brant, Research Associate at the Lowy Institute for International Policy. I began by asking her, why is China so secretive about its aid program?
That's a complicated question, Stan. There are a lot of factors behind why China is secretive about its aid program. Some of that stems from, obviously, the authoritarian regime in China and its tradition of, I guess, hiding data. But there's also a domestic element to that. You've got to remember that China is still a developing country itself, and there's a lot of poverty in China. And so releasing details about China giving aid to other countries can cause problems back home.
Now, there is a lot of criticism about China's aid, that it is aimed at exploiting other countries, that it is often given unconditionally to rogue regimes, to countries that are often corrupt, that it undermines good governance. Are they concerns that you share?
Not on the whole. I mean, I think some of those concerns are applicable, but not across the board.
Now, when we look at Africa in particular, it takes almost half of China's overall aid budget. What are the aims of China in investing so heavily into Africa?
There's a number of aims to China's aid program in Africa and around the world more generally. Like any donor, these can be economic aims, political aims, some geostrategic objectives. Also, China is concerned about its image worldwide, and it does want to be perceived as a responsible actor. And giving aid is one way to do this.
Of course, it's very hungry for natural resources, and again, the cynics would say that part of the aid program here is to exploit the resources that Africa has to offer.
That's a common understanding about China's aid, but actually most of its aid doesn't go towards natural resources. Perhaps investment and trade links are associated with the quest for natural resources, but its aid program is directed more broadly than that.
Where does investment end and aid begin for China? Is it difficult to separate the two?
It is challenging to separate the two. China can separate the two, but often it announces a package of financing, and this may include some commercial loans, some export credits, and some what we would define as aid. And so it is, from the outside, sometimes difficult to tell what is what.
Now, when you look at the numbers, and again, it's very difficult to quantify them because of the secrecy involved here, but in Africa, certainly most estimates have put it in the tens of billions and comparable to what the United States would send in aid to countries in Africa. Is this part of a soft power battleground, if you like, that China sees Africa as a part of the world that's going to be important to it, and sees itself as a counterpoint to the United States and US influence there?
I'm not sure China sees itself as a direct counterpoint to the US there, but it certainly sees Africa as an important continent for both economic reasons, but also for broader reasons of diplomacy.
If you flip it as well, how do African countries then see China's aid? Because, again, if you look at countries like South Africa, for instance, they often see that they have a more equal relationship when it comes to receiving aid from China. It's far more of a two-way process. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, indeed. Of course, the responses of African countries will be mixed, but China projects its aid as being one based on friendship, based on equality, based on the idea that African countries can benefit, but also China will benefit as well. And so many countries around the world appreciate this sort of more sisterly, brotherly idea of giving aid.
Is it just about political influence or being able to get access to markets, or is there a degree of altruism involved as well?
I think there there is an element of altruism, although China doesn't like using the term altruism or the idea of aid as a gift. It's more, as I said, one of friendship.
If you look at the way China applies its aid, is it then going with its policy of a peaceful rise, peaceful development, non-interference when it comes to foreign policy? Is that a better model than the West?
That's a difficult question to answer, I think. I think there are elements of China's aid giving that are beneficial and that Western donors could probably reflect upon. Particularly the tradition of quite intensive, intrusive demands from Western donors. But by the same token, there are issues with governance and with human rights and broader political issues in many countries, including China. And so there is a concern with just giving aid with no conditions attached and what the side effects of that may be.
Finally, Philippa, is there any ground where the West, where other countries are able to work with China when it comes to aid projects, where there can be a little bit more synergy?
I think there is. I think we're starting to see that both China, Western countries, and for that matter, African countries, are keen for all donors to cooperate. And we can see this particularly, I think, in the health sector, also in agriculture, and in humanitarian assistance.
Philippa, once again, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsNight.
My pleasure.